Hello again, football fans, and welcome to RFL Morning Drive. I am your host, Chris Dunn, the RFL ambassador. Um, I know it's been a little while that you guys have seen me or heard me, so I apologize for that. You might be able to tell that I am a little sick right now, and this is the day. This is day number 7. This is officially day number 7. So I started to come down with this the night before the Super Bowl. I spent all of Super Bowl Sunday sleeping right up until kickoff, and then I fell asleep after kickoff because the game was boring as all get out. And thankfully, I did not have to watch the Chiefs win 3 Super Bowls in a row. So I am trying to get there for you guys. It's been a struggle all week. So I appreciate those of you that were losing your mind, pulling your hair out. For those of you that have hair, wondering where I was, why I wasn't lashing out at whatever I might want to lash out at. And I'm here. I'm here for you now. And I think it's only fitting to try to do a little RFL in the morning, an RFL AM show. So I'll try to do this from time to time. Maybe Saturday mornings will be a good time, and I can look at the RFL morning drive. I think it would be perfect if I can make it work, especially with the week ending on a Friday, rolling into Saturday, the RFL podcast Saturday night. What better way to kick off the weekend than have a little morning drive on Saturday morning, get you through your afternoon, and then you've got the RFL podcast on Saturday night. So, again, I thank you guys for being here. I'll take a quick peek at the chat. I see some guys in here. Ronnie Shanahan, good to see you in here. You're going to want to stick around. Don't go anywhere. You're going to be interested in some of the things that I have to say here. But before I get into anything, I think the biggest news out there that you guys have probably seen, or maybe some of you have not seen, it happened this week. It isn't something that came lightly. It isn't something that came without a lot of thought and without a lot of anxiety, even. But at the end of the day, the RFL is a business here. I am trying to run a team to not just potentially win now, but also win in the future. And the emphasis there being on the future, right? Because at the end of the day, just like in any business situation, you're always looking toward the future. And sometimes that means you have to sacrifice a little bit of the right now in order to benefit the future of the organization, the future of the team. I've talked about this ad nauseum. Anybody that knows anything about me and my coaching style and the way I run my team and the way that I look at this league and enjoy this league knows that inevitably every single season you're going to get to a certain point where certain teams are going to identify themselves as contenders or non-contenders, or buyers or sellers. And in my opinion, what separates a good GM from an ordinary GM is someone who has the ability to recognize that honestly and truthfully as soon as it happens. Because the sooner you can identify it, the better off you're going to be. And let me explain what that means. The sooner you identify honestly and truthfully who you are as a team, the better off you're going to be. I know it's very easy, especially in the beginning of the season, to think things will be different. Things are going to change. But no one ever does the reverse. Nobody ever starts off the season 4-0 and says things are going to be different. Things are going to change. When you start the season 4-0, you say, "Hey, we're a contender." And by proxy, we are in the concept of buyers and sellers, we are buyers. Right? That's what happens. And then on the flip side, the reverse, when you start the season 0-4, you do say, "Oh, things are going to change. Things are going to be different." But you don't do that when you start 4-0. When you start 4-0, you say, "I got a shot. I'm in it." So how come when you start 0-4, you don't then say, we got no shot? And that's my point about what separates a good GM from an ordinary average general manager. A really good GM recognizes at some point when his team is 0-4, 1-4, 0-5, 1-5. Okay, I need to do something. Right? Because no GM that starts 5-0 is going to be like, "Oh, things are going to change. Things are going to be different. We're going to lose 7 games in a row and we're going to be a 500 team at the end of the year." You don't do that. And so if you don't do it on the positive, then don't go to extremes on the negative. And that's what people oftentimes do. In my opinion, that's what an average, ordinary general manager does. They see that their team is 1-3 or 2-4 or 0-5, and they justify it somehow, and they say things are going to be different without looking at the landscape of the team and without looking at what is in the best interest of, again, I'm going to use the word future. You always have to be looking towards the future. And so I say all of that to circle back to the big story out of Sacramento. This just happened literally after our week 5 loss to the Toronto Huskies. We fall into 1-4, and before guys could even leave the locker room, Buck Ulbrich had been traded. And there's a lot of opinion. I'm sure everybody has an opinion on this, and I'm here for it. You guys know that I am completely open. I'm completely honest, but I'm also completely here for you. So if you have thoughts and opinions about stuff, I welcome that all the time. I always am saying things and trying to do things to get you guys engaged and to get you guys to provide your commentary on what you think about certain things that are going on in the league. I do that with the rest of the league. I do that with all the other teams. I do that with whatever topic I might be talking about at any given moment. And so certainly I'm going to give you that same forum when I'm talking about something that is my own team. Now, listen, there's a lot of you out there that probably think this was a terrible move by me, and that's fine. I get it. Because you're looking at an 85 overall wide receiver and an 83 or 84 overall offensive lineman, and you're saying you got a first-round draft pick and a couple replacement players. And yes, on the surface, that's exactly what it is. But Buck Ulbrich is 30 years old. And at 1-4, I'm doing exactly what I mentioned good GMs do. I'm recognizing that it's going to be difficult for this team to be a contender this season. At 1-4, when first place in your division is 5-0, hasn't even lost a game yet, it's going to be difficult. There are no more automatic wins. So you look at our situation and you have to be honest. And that's what happened here. Buck Ulbrich still has 3 years left on that contract. He's going to be 31, 32, and 33. And at that point, he's not going to be an 85 overall wide receiver. He's going to be mid 70s after regression. He's going to regress every year for the next 3 years. What good does that do my team this year? What good does it do me at 1-4 to have a guy who's 30 years old and going to be regressing? There's no benefit for me. I'll tell you wherein lies the benefit. The benefit lies in the rest of the guys in the wide receiver room that are 21 years old, 22 years old, that are not regressing. They are actively progressing. And now they get a little bit more playing time. And you saw in that Huskies game, you saw a guy like Ajon Grant, who I believe had five, maybe 6 catches for 55, 56 yards. You saw him catch his first touchdown in the RFL. You saw those things happening because I put him in more sets and actively took Buck out of some sets because I had been looking to move Buck for the better part of 4 weeks now, basically since the start of the season. You have to be willing to make difficult decisions. And I understand it. And this is where I'll go back out to the chat here and see what you guys think. Give you guys an opportunity here to see some of the comments. Oh, we got some new guys in here. So again, forgive me, guys. A lot of you have names, YouTube names that I just don't know. If it's not your player name, I might not know it. So, Mr. Calling Home, good to see you. That looks like a new one. I don't know who you are, so shout out. Appreciate you tuning in. I probably do know who you are. You'll probably tell me, or someone will tell me in a minute, and then I'll realize who you are. In fact, listen, this is not a joke. Alvin Mack here. Dunn was working the phones on the sideline during the game. So I will just tell you guys, this trade was already finalized before that game even started. As you know, that game was a premiere game, so that game had been recorded already. And after that game was recorded, the timeline of events were, I put Buck Ulbrich and Griffin Goodman on the trade block about 3 weeks ago. I had conversations with maybe one or two other GMs about one of those guys. I hadn't really had any conversations with anybody about both of them included in the same potential deal. But I had conversations with other teams about Goodman individually or Buck individually. And ultimately, I knew what I wanted to try to get out of the deal, and I knew what I wasn't able to get out of the deal. So you have to remember too, in the bylaws of the RFL, we are only allowed to have a maximum of 3 picks within any round. So you're only allowed, the most you can have is 3 first-round picks, 3 second-round picks. You can't have any more than that. I currently, prior to this deal, already had 3 second-round picks. And a lot of the conversations around, especially Griffin Goodman, were centered around a second-round pick. Well, I can't really take on another second-round pick. I'm not allowed to have 4 second-round picks. I already have 3. Now, could I have made the deal and acquired 4 second-round picks? Probably, but then I would have been forced into a situation where I had to, between now and the draft, trade one of those second round picks, which I don't ever want to put myself in a position where I'm forced into making a deal, because then I don't have any leverage. I don't have any leverage, and the value of that pick is tarnished because I have to get rid of it. So, if I'm looking at, let's say Mac and I, for example, are going back and forth, and I know that he has something that he absolutely has to get rid of. If I know that Mac has 3 second round picks, or I'm sorry, he has 4 second round picks and he has to get rid of one, I'll make him an offer for one of those second round picks, but I might lowball a little bit, and maybe not crazy, but I might offer a little bit less. I might try to get a little bit more value, because I know that he absolutely has to get rid of it. He cannot keep that pick. So either he's going to take my offer, even if it might be a little bit below market or a little bit below what his asking price is. He's either going to take my offer, or he's going to continue to walk down that road and get closer and closer to the point where he screws himself and he has to get rid of it for next to nothing, because he can't have 4 second round picks. And so I already had 3. I couldn't take on a 4th. And that's where a lot of the conversation was. And I wanted to, at that point, try to get a 1st, right? What if I include a little bit more? What if I include Griffin Goodman and a 3rd round, instead of Griffin Goodman straight up for a 2nd, right? Hypothetically. What if I include a 3rd? Instead of Griffin Goodman, let's say somebody offers me Griffin Goodman for a 2nd. I can't do it. Well, what if I throw in a 3rd? Would they give me their 1st? What if I throw in a 3rd and a 4th? Would they give me their 1st? And the problem that you run into is a lot of times people are reluctant to give up their 1st round picks. Sorry, guys. Again, told you I'm sick, so just bear with me a little bit here. So that's the situation that we run into, is a lot of times guys are just reluctant to give up those picks. But when you can get those picks, they can be game changing. And so to include Buck, and I'm not even 100% positive if you were to ask Baker, right? Because Buck and Goodman are now going to the Houston Voyagers. In return, we have received Morgan Minich, who is an offensive lineman. He'll get some reps with the starting team, I believe. But there's some other guys that we currently have on the roster that we will move in and out. And then also Trent Williams came over in the deal. He was a wide receiver as well. In order to make the deal work for Baker, he kind of had to look at shedding a little bit of salary if he was taking on Buck and Goodman's salary. So I said, sure, I can take on a little bit of salary in return. Just let me know what works. And those were the guys that ultimately kind of worked for Baker, kind of worked for me. And so Trent Williams comes over in the deal. He's an 80 overall wide receiver. He's 25 years old. He's still pretty young. He'll work as a special teamer, kick returner, might get a little playing time in the slot. He's a small guy. He's not a 6 foot, 6 foot receiver. He's 5'7", maybe $180 soaking wet. And so he'll get some run on the return game. And then also he'll get a little bit of run in the slot. But the big move here, the big deal, was getting that 1st round pick. The 1st round pick was the catalyst. Ultimately, I would have done this deal for just the 1st round pick. Even if I didn't get Trent Williams in return, and even if I didn't get Morgan Minich, I would have made the deal just for the 1st round pick. And I know some of you might now be saying, well, that's crazy. The reality is, for the Sacramento Miners, Buck Ulbrich wasn't going to do enough over the course of the next 2 or 3 years to suddenly bump us from where we are as a playoff team to where we want to be as a real bowl champion. It just wasn't going to happen, right? Again, he's going to regress over the course of the next 3 years. And so if we're saying that this year is kind of a wash already, well, then next year, instead of coming in as an 85 overall, let's say he comes in as an 83 overall or an 82 overall. Well, what makes us think that he's going to suddenly, be that stud that gets us to the Real Bowl then? Why would any forward, progressive thinking, realistic GM think that that was going to be the case? And ultimately, I don't. And so he went. And in came a first-round pick. I see Darius Hodge here has something. What do you say? You got draft capital for the future. It was a good move. No need to keep an aging receiver, especially after you just drafted a receiver in the first round in Grant. Accurate. 100% accurate. So I used the 14th overall pick to draft Ajon Grant. Ajon Grant is 21 years old. We are 5 weeks into his rookie season, and you guys have already started to see what kind of impact he could make, right? Didn't get a lot of playing time in the first 4 weeks. Was ultimately the wide receiver 4 for most of those weeks. There was one game where I bumped him up to wide receiver 3. We didn't look all that great. There were some playbook changes that were made. But then this week, I bumped him up. We had a different playbook. I think you saw just Ajon scratching the surface of what he can do for this team. 5 catches for, 56 yards. That's not going to win championships. That's not going to win awards. But it is going to win the locker room over as a rookie. And so to give Ajon Grant an opportunity to develop as a 21-year-old is a big deal. When you have a rookie that you can start and give consistent playing time to, they will develop quicker. And we all know the best time to expedite development is their rookie season. Age 21, 22, 23. That's it. You're going to get more development out of a guy from age 21 to 23 than you're going to get from that guy from probably 23 to 30. And that's just the reality. From 21 to 30, you've got 10 years, right? You're certainly going to get from 21 to 24. You're easily going to get more than you're going to get from 25 to 30. Those first 4 years are far superior than the back end 6. And so to be able to do that early on is a win for us. Now, we're currently sitting at 1-4. What does that mean for the rest of the season? I don't know. But what I do know is that I said this to all of you at the beginning of the season. Inevitably, at some point during this year, we were going to get to a point where we identified, holy crap, blank team is not going to make the playoffs. Holy crap, blank team has been eliminated, is going to finish in last place. And you can throw out any number of teams that you might be thinking of right now. Sure, it's easy to throw out the Sacramento Miners. Holy crap, the Sacramento Miners are 1-4. They're tied for last place in the ARC West. Holy crap, the Houston Cougars are 0-5. They're in last place in the ARC North. Holy crap, the Columbus Explorers are 1-4. They're tied for last place in the NRC North. The Memphis Steamers are 2-3. Fortunately for them, that's only a game back of first place in the NRC East. But I said this at the beginning of the year, with this game being all in one file and no longer having two different files, no longer having automatic wins, we're going to see some shenanigans. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Think about this for a second. Some of the guys, some of the GMs that you guys think of, like some of the big GMs that you constantly see and constantly think of in this league, right? Let's throw Bill out there. Let's throw Rob out there. Let's throw myself out there, right? Like we are three of the most forward-facing, if not the three most forward-facing general managers in the league, right? Like we are the ones that you see the most. The Explorers are 1-4. The Miners are 1-4, and the Cougars are 0-5. Collectively, we are 2-13. That's terrible. I think that at the beginning of the year, you could have said, here's the punishment if you three go 2-13. And you could have laid out the worst punishment known to man. Put it in the chat. What do you think is the worst punishment in the world? What's the worst punishment that we could have got? If you had told us that that would have been our punishment for starting, we would have said, okay, fine. Not worried about it. Not worried about starting 1-4. I'm not worried about Rob starting. Well, Rob, maybe I was a little worried about you starting 0-5. Bill, I'm not worried about you starting 1-4. None of us would have signed up for that. We never would have thought in a million years that that would have happened. And yet here we are. This whole entire season. It's all crazy. Let's take a look at what else you guys got here in the chat. Being a little bit slow. It's not. Here we go. Oh, JJ Harris. That's who Mr. Calling Home is. Sweet. So Buck Ulbrich is gone. Griffin Goodman is gone. And the state of the RFL is unknown, wild. It's all over the place. Right now, if you take a look at the leaders, the division leaders in the RFL and the NRC, in the NRC North, the Lumberjacks are 3-2. The Diablos are 4-1. That isn't a shock. So let's just go shock value, right? On a scale of 1 to 5, what's the shock value of the division leader that I'm about to tell you? NRC North, Lumberjacks, 3-2. In a division with the Explorers, my shock value there is a 4. Actually, my shock value there is a 5. The NRC South, the Diablos are 4-1. The Desperados are in that division. The Thunderbirds are in that division. And the Tigers are in that division. While my shock value certainly isn't a 5, with the talent in that division and the other teams that are in that division, I would certainly say that my shock value is a 3 and maybe bordering closer to a 4. And then the NRC West, the Snowhawks are 3-2, tied with the Condors at 3-2. That division is kind of just like right here. Snowhawks 3-2, Condors 3-2, Crusaders 2-3, Elks 2-3. Those four are going to be going at it. So my shock value there is probably a 1. I'm not surprised at all that the Snowhawks are winning the division, and I'm not surprised at all that the division is so tightly contested. I also said that at the beginning of the year. I think the NRC West is out of all of the divisions, I think it is the division that is the most tight-knit and most tightly contested. I think at the end of the year, when you look at the difference between the number of wins from the first place team to the number of wins to the last place team, the NRC West is going to have the fewest differential. I just don't see a scenario where the Snowhawks have 7 more or 8 more wins than the Crusaders or the Elks. And then the NRC East, the Shamrocks are 3-2. Shock value here, I guess I would say, is maybe a 3. And again, that's only because I think we all kind of would have pegged the Steamers to be ahead in this division. So on the NRC side of things, we've got 2 of the 4 divisions with some pretty good shock value. Certainly the NRC North is the big one, with the Explorers being tied for bottom of the barrel. And then when you move over to the ARC, in the ARC North, you've got the Hogs at 5-0. Now I'm going to get into the Hogs in a minute. So I know Ronnie Shanahan, I told you a little bit earlier to stick around. You'll want to hear some of this. The Huskies are 3-2, the Pioneers 2-3, and the Cougars 0-5, I believe. So shock value here with the Hogs in first place. For me, it's not as great as it is for most people. Again, if you remember back at the beginning of the year when I did the predictions, the Miners Live on predictions, the experts out there that basically gone through and picked winners and losers for every single game for the entire season had the Hogs. Actually, I have it here. And so I'll pull it up for you. The ARC North. So at the beginning of the year, the ARC North predictions looked like this. And I said a month and a half ago now, I don't like where the Cincinnati Hogs are on this list. I don't mind where they are in terms of the standings, but I cannot fathom them being 4-13. I just do not. I don't like it at all. I think it's a team that was getting disrespected as a team that made the playoffs last year. And I just didn't see a reason for them to be projected to be so bad after the performance that they had last season. And now here they are 5 weeks into the season, and they've already surpassed the projections of 4 wins on the year. If you look at the ARC South, the Sentinels at 4-1 and the Armadillos at 4-1. So I think the shock factor here, the shock value here for me, Forbes, I don't think I gave you a 4. I think I gave you a 3. And again, I caveat, the only reason I gave you a 3 is because I could make an argument for every team in your division to win the division. And I don't think there's any division other than the NRC South that I could have done that at the beginning of the year. The NRC North, you couldn't have made the argument. The NRC West, I don't think you could have made the argument for the Elks. The NRC East, you couldn't have made the argument. So, when you look at the teams in that division, The shock value isn't really based on you and the Diablos being 4-1. It's just on the fact that there's, I guess it could have been anyone up there. I think no matter what, the shock value could have been a 3. ARC North, again, Hogs 5-0. I'm not as shocked as many of you guys are. I liked the Hogs last year. If you remember, we played the Hogs in the regular season last year, and I believe the final score of the game was 7-0. We won 7-0, and it was, we scored a touchdown on the opening drive, our opening drive of the game. That was it. We scored on the opening drive of the game. There was not a single point scored the rest of the game. I've never seen that in a game. I've never seen that in an RFL game in my life. And the Hogs were good. So my shock value there for the Hogs is probably around a 3. A lot of people are higher on the Huskies than I am. So if you want to put, if you want to say that you thought the Huskies were going to win the division, that's fine. I'm not going to argue with you on that. But I just don't think that it was as glaringly obvious to pick the Huskies to win that division as a lot of you might have thought. ARC South, the Sentinels are 4-1, Dillos 4-1, Dreadnoughts 3-2, Voyagers 2-3. I think the shock value here is probably a 4. Maybe even the shock value here is a 5. Because if you told me that the Dreadnoughts were not going to be in first, I would have said, okay. If you told me that the Voyagers were not going to be in first, I would have said, okay. But if you told me that the Sentinels were going to be in first, I would have had pause. And if you told me that the Armadillos were going to be 4-1, I would have had pause. And right now, those teams are playing phenomenal football. Like, there's not many teams playing better, certainly than the Armadillos. Say what you want about the methods. Say what you want about the decisions, the moves, the mindset, the whatever. That team is playing some great football. When you look at the ARC West, did anybody have the St. Louis Aviators at 5-0? Did anybody have the St. Louis Aviators winning this division? Getting rid of Marquise Washington? In a division with the Red Dragons and the Miners? Aviators are 5-0. The Red Dragons are second place and they're 2-3. I mean, the Aviators are going to mess around and win this division by week 11. The way that it's going right now. And then the ARC East. So my shock value there on the ARC West, probably a 4. If you told me the Red Dragons were going to win the division, fine. The Miners going to win the division, fine. I would have never picked the Bisons or the Aviators. And for the Aviators to be 5-0 right now, just goes to show you the parity and the diversity in the RFL this season. And then in the ARC East, the Bulls are 4-1, the Bulldogs are 3-1, the Black Knights are 4-1, and then the Celtic Tigers are 2-2. So, are the Bulldogs 3-1, or are they? I missed the game last night, I think. This is the most top-heavy division. The ARC East has 3 teams right now that look really good. So the Bulldogs are 3-2. So the Bulls are 4-1. The Black Knights are 4-1. They're tied for first. And then the Bulldogs are in third at 3-2, tied with the Celtic Tigers. Shock value here. I would have obviously picked the Bulldogs to be in first place. And if I had to pick a second team, I would have picked the Black Knights. Marquise Washington going from the Aviators to, I'm sorry, Geno Gannon went to the Black Knights. I'm not surprised that the Black Knights are 4-1. I am a little surprised that the Bulls are 4-1. Shock value here, probably around a 3. Right. So we're not quite a third of the way through the season. And we've got half the league, half the divisions in the league with a moderate to severe level of shock. And I don't know that that's going to change. I think we're going to see more of this. I think what's going to be interesting is as we get closer to the trade deadline, was Buck Ulbrich and Griffin Goodman being traded? Was me making that move the first domino? Is that going to be the first domino to fall? Is that going to be the first move that a general manager makes, signaling, okay, maybe this isn't our year, and let's do something to help us in the future? Because now going into next season, the Sacramento Miners have 2 picks in the first round. We have our own first round pick, which might be pretty good. And then we also have the Houston Voyagers first round pick, which, let's not forget, right now the Voyagers are in last place in that division. They're 2-3. Yes, they just got Buck Ulbrich, and yes, they just got Griffin Goodman. But that doesn't mean that all of a sudden they're going to turn things around and they're going to win the division and they're going to make a deep run. There's a chance that the Voyagers don't make the playoffs. And if they don't make the playoffs, well, then there's another draft pick inside of the top 18. So the Miners could be looking at 2 draft picks in the first 18 picks of the draft next year. Then we have 3 picks in the second round. Again, one of which is our own, could be pretty good. One of the other second round picks is the Voyagers. So we have the Voyagers first and second now at this point. Again, could be decent. The Voyagers might not make the playoffs. And then the other second round pick that we have is the DC Marshals. And right now they're 0-5. So that could be one of the first handful of picks in the second round. So we're talking about a situation where right now, as it stands, I have the possibility of picking 5 times in the first 45 players, 5 of the first 45 players. And that's very realistic. I might even pick 5 of the first 40. There's a good chance I pick 4 of the first 36. Because the Marshals second round pick and the Miners second round pick could be top 5. And if they're top 5 picks, well, then that's inside of 36, inside of 37. That would give us 4 picks in the top 37 players. And I've said this for those of you that were criticizing the Chicago Cougars and the state of the union there in Chicago and all the drama that's going on. Say what you want about them. Call them a dumpster fire, call it an implosion, call it whatever you want. The reality of the situation is 1 year from now, that team is going to look a lot different. They have 3 picks in the first round. And when you have 3 picks in the first round, you can turn a franchise around really quick. Or at least you can garner some significant respect really quick. You guys have seen what I've been able to do and what the Miners locker room has been able to do in basically a year and a half. I went from having nobody in our locker room. We had no one in the locker room. I was able to make a draft day trade to get Anthony Fry. And Anthony Fry will tell you, he was the only one in the locker room. The same year I drafted Jacari Torres, the same year I drafted Pavo Frederick, the same year I drafted Kenny Forrester. All guys that ended up gone. Not in the locker room. Anthony Fry and myself were the only ones in the locker room that year. And then the following year, being able to add the likes of Miles McCain, Eric Ashley, Killian Bain, who, by the way, might win Defensive Player of the Year. So for those of you that don't know the name Killian Bain and haven't taken a moment to appreciate or haven't reached out yet to congratulate him on what he's accomplished so far this season, your boy might win Defensive Player of the Year. And to add a guy like Connor Jameson, even a guy like Grant Culpepper, who's a depth option in the secondary, but he's still there in the locker room. He's still hanging out. To be able to build a locker room from 0 to 10 guys, 10 solid guys within 2.5 seasons, basically within 3 draft classes, and honestly, really within 2 draft classes, right? Because take away Anthony Fry, he was the only one from that draft class. So really with just 2 draft classes to be able to build that locker room. And so the Cougars are going to be able to do that. They already have a locker room. Say what you want about it. You might think that there's turmoil. You might think that guys are talking behind each other's backs and saying things that, maybe they shouldn't say. But the reality is that will get itself situated. They recently fired the offensive coordinator. I get it. There's probably a million thoughts that you could have about the Chicago Cougars. I feel like this entire RFL season, the discussion, at least in terms of this show, in terms of anyone that's been watching Miners Live and certainly now Morning Drive, the conversation has been dominated by the Austin Armadillos and what the hell they're doing with some of their players and the transition and the turnaround that they've had and the performance that they've had all of a sudden. Or the conversation was geared towards the Chicago Cougars and what is going on with the Cougars. Rob is gone. Rob is back. Gino Gannon's there. Gino Gannon's gone. An OC's brought in. Player wants to leave. Guys are saying things in the locker room, but then saying different things out of the locker room, saying things out of the locker room that don't make sense based on what's happening in the locker room. And I guess more than anything, we shouldn't know anything about a locker room, right? Like that's the whole point. The only thing that you guys should ever know about the Sacramento Miners locker room or the Chicago Cougars locker room is what I tell you or what Rob tells you. And all of my players know that. Every single one of my players knows. Don't say anything outside. Don't say anything about our locker room to anybody else. I don't even love my players talking to other GMs. It's not my favorite. I get that it's a league, and I get that we're all in a big community together. But I've had conversations with guys in my locker room when I found out that they've been having extensive conversations with Baker or with Forbes or with Rob or whatever, and these long back and forth conversations. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, genuinely, what are you doing? Why? Because I need to know what's going on. Because I can't run the risk that guys in my locker room are having daily at-length conversations with other GMs in the league. There's too much at stake. Eric Ashley puts it here, gold standard. Yes, that's for any of the guys in our locker room. They know exactly what that means. We are the Sacramento Miners, and we live by the gold standard. I think you got a typo here, Rob. I assume you're trying to say a lot of guys want to confide in head coaches who have, I assume, a reputation. Yes, 100%. That's normal. I have guys that come to me too. But it doesn't mean that I'm not at least going to have the conversation or at least plant the seed to the guys in our locker room. Hey, if you're having this long conversation with Rob in a DM about whatever, just make sure it has nothing to do with this team or anything that I do with this team. Right? Like that's normal. That's common. Right? Like in no real life situation would you ever want your players going and talking to other GMs. Now, do people go to Rob because he's been in the league for a long time? Do people, look up to Bill because he's been in the league a long time? Do people look up to me because, of my standing in the league or, whatever I might do for the league? Yeah. And as the self-appointed RFL ambassador, I'm always going to be there for people. But that also means that I'm going to be minor first in terms of I've had conversations with people in DMs that were asking me questions that I wasn't in good conscience willing to answer 100% truthfully because it was going to potentially give away trade secrets or give away information about my team or how I run my team that I don't want other people to know. So I will do everything I can to help people, but I'm not going to give away team secrets, basically, is the point. And so this is interesting. Rob brings up this point. Having too many user players is a headache. I can see it becoming a major issue for head coaches down the line. I think what he meant to say is it has already become a major issue for this head coach currently. I don't think he's saying down the line. I think he's probably actively looking at himself in the mirror while typing that, especially when the players don't really respect you. So I'm just gonna go ahead and slide that one off the screen real quick because I don't disagree with Rob. I 100% agree with him, and I think it's unfortunate that he's found himself in that position. If you guys haven't had an opportunity to go back and watch the one-on-one with Dunn that I did a sit-down interview with Rob when the drama kind of came to a head and Darnell Hodge requested the trade. And I think it's interesting. I do believe he is 100% correct. At some point, you have too many personalities in the locker room. And you have to define what that number is. What number is too many? Because for Rob, too many might be 7. For me, too many might be 9. Right? Like it varies. For some guys out there, too many might be 4. 1, it depends on the locker room, and 2, it depends on the dynamics of the personalities. If you have a locker room of 4 and all 4 of them are completely different personalities, that could be too much. But you could have 7 guys in the locker room and all 7 of them feel the same way about everything. And it's great. And it works smooth. And ultimately, I believe right now, the Miners locker room, we've got, I think 9, possibly 10. And we've done a really good job. I've done a really good job of making sure that the guys in there are all kind of on the same. I can't honestly recall a moment where there was ever any level of animosity or contention. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe guys just do a good job of internalizing it and keeping it to themselves. But nothing has ever been brought into my attention from anyone in our locker room. But yes, it is 100% accurate to say at some point, too many personalities in the locker room can be a bad thing. All right, let's take a peek out here to the chat. Joshua Prince talking to Mix. What do we got here? All right. So I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. I talked about the Cincinnati Hogs being 5-0 on the season, which I just did not envision. I did not envision them being 5-0. I think it's a bit of a stretch for them to be in the position that they're in. And so I want to take a minute here, and while they're playing unbelievable and they're in first place, and I told you all at the beginning of the year that they were a better team than they were projected to be, the Cincinnati Hogs are not that good. They're not this good. Let me rephrase. They're not this good. And for those of you that are looking at them as a 5-0 team that could win 15 games, I just don't think that's possible. I don't see that happening. Now, again, everything in the league this year is a little bit all over the place. It's a little bit wild. I never saw the Explorers being 1-4, the Steamers being 2-3, or the Miners being 1-4. I didn't. But when you look at the Cincinnati Hogs, okay, we all we all love Ronnie Shanahan, right? To some degree, we all have some level of appreciation for Ronnie Shanahan. Whether it's because we watched him in college and we appreciated what he did at Oregon, or whether it's because he's a rookie and he's 5-0, he's got his team 5-0, whatever it might be. We all kind of have some sort of appreciation factor for Ronnie Shanahan. He's a good community dude. He never says anything to piss anyone off. He never says anything to get himself in trouble. He's just a good all-around dude. He's a good all-around community guy. He's what you would say is a guy that's easy to root for, right? It's easy to root for Ronnie Shanahan. And so, with that said, it's easy to root for the Cincinnati Hogs, right? Okay, great. Let's root for them. But just know that when you're talking about rooting for the Cincinnati Hogs, you are rooting for something that is a bit of a mystery. It's a bit of a mirage, if you will. Because while the Cincinnati Hogs are 5-0, they are averaging less than 20 points a game. They're averaging 19 points a game. That's 25th in the league. So there's only 7 teams in the league that are averaging fewer points than them. Right? They have a total of under 1,500 total yards of offense, which is 25th in the league. They're averaging under 300 yards of total offense a game. 1,472 yards, right? Divided by 5 games. They're averaging 294 yards per game of total offense. How in the world is a team averaging less than 300 yards of total offense 5-0? The Sacramento Miners are 1-4, and I think we're averaging more than that. Right? Passing yards. 958 total passing yards. Listen, we could all sit here and root for Ronnie Shanahan all day long. He is a rookie. So to see that the Cincinnati Hogs are 30th in passing yards is not a shock. They're led by a rookie. Rookies aren't finishing top 5, top 10 in the league in passing. It doesn't happen. 958 passing yards. That's an average of 190, we'll call it 192. 192 passing yards per game. That's 30th in the league. So points per game, they're 25th. Total yards offense, they're 25th. And passing yards, they're 30th. Now, the only saving grace that they really have in all of this is that their running game is 9th in the league, which is led by Dre Shivers, who has 411. On the defensive side of things, okay. their defense is only giving up about 15 points a game. So the average Cincinnati Hogs game, the final score is 19-15. Hogs win. It's very hard for a team in the RFL to hold their opponent to 15 points a game. I feel like the Sacramento Miners have had one of the better defenses in the league over the course of the last few years. And even we were giving up on average, I think like 19, somewhere between like 18 and 20. It's very hard to keep a team to 15. Their defense is 11th in yards allowed, 6th in passing yards allowed, and then 27th in rushing yards allowed. So the story here really is the ground game. On offense, the Hogs are led by their ground game. They're 9th in the league in rushing. Dre Shivers, like I said, 411 yards on the ground. And then on defense, the only aspect of their defense that isn't performing well is the run game, stopping the run. And if you look at the schedule that they've had so far, right, like week 1, they had the Cougars 10-7. Not a very common outcome. You're not going to see a lot of 7 points allowed. And then week 2, the Monarchs, 28-21, they got the win. Week 3, they got the Cougars again. So 2 things here that stand out to me. One, they've played the Cougars twice. The Cougars, clearly we've seen, are having some struggles, as several teams are. I would say the same thing about us, right? If we had played the Hogs twice already this season and lost both times, I would say the same thing about us. But the Cougars are 0-5, and the Hogs have played them twice. And in those 2 games, the Cougars have only scored a total in 2 games of 22 points. Right? So the Cougars benefit, the Hogs benefit a little there from playing the Cougars twice. But they've also played the Desperados, and they've played the Thunderbirds, and they won both of those games. Mind you, they were close, both of them by a final of 20-17, but they did in fact win both of those games. So while it's easy to look at the Hogs on the surface and say, well, they're 5-0. They must be on cloud 9. Boy, the Hogs are in heaven right now. I don't see anything that stands out to me to think that this is a team that could be 14-3 when the season's over. This is a team to me that at some point in the next 6 weeks, at some point in the next month and a half, there's probably going to be a losing streak. You've got week 6 on the road at Toronto, week 7 at home against the Red Dragons. Could they lose both of those games? Again, I know it's hard to predict that they're going to lose because they've started 5-0. But on the road at the Huskies, they could lose that game. At home against the Red Dragons are a quality opponent. And now all of a sudden you've got a 5-0 team that could become 5-2. And suddenly those rankings And the mindset and your thoughts around the Cincinnati Hogs has completely changed. When I show you a team that's 5-0, but they rank in the bottom third or in the bottom 25% in points scored, passing yards, and total offense, you'll say, that's all right. You win the game by running the ball, eating up the clock. That's what you would say. But if I showed you a 5-2 team that was in the bottom 25% in those same categories, you would then be saying, well, they need to figure something out. If they could figure out the passing game, maybe they wouldn't be 5-2. Maybe they would be 7-0 or 6-1. Okay, well, I'm saying that right now. I don't care that they're 5-0. I'm saying that right now. Again, you have to be able to recognize things and call things out prior to them happening. If you're not capable of doing that, and even more so, if you're not willing to do that, that's where you get yourself in trouble. And right now, I'm sitting here on Morning Drive telling you guys that a month from now, right? This could be another pull the receipts where Dunner was right, where Dunner was wrong. 1 month from now, we're going to be talking about a Cincinnati Hogs team that is exactly where we thought they were going to be. Do I think they're going to lose the next 4 games in a row? No. But if they lose 2 of their next 4, I'm going to say that's exactly what I thought. Now, at that point, they would be 7-2, and that's still a phenomenal record, and they'll probably still be in first place. But it'll be a different trend, and we'll be looking at it significantly differently than we are right now. Right? And so we go back and we talk about the rankings, right? Like the passing yards, all that stuff. And we talked about the Chicago Cougars. 2 of their 5 games were against the Chicago Cougars. Cougars only scored 22 points total in those 2 games. And we talk about the Hogs being in the bottom 25%, right? In most of those categories. Well, the Cougars are last in points scored. There's no team in the league that averages fewer points per game than the Chicago Cougars. And the Hogs have played them twice. The Cougars are 32nd in the league in points per game. They're 26th in total offense, 23rd in passing yards, and 19th in rushing yards. So basically, the Cougars are bottom third in every single offensive category. And you could even say, with the exception of running, they're bottom 25%. Have the Hogs benefited? And is your opinion of the Hogs skewed because they've had the luxury of playing a team like the Cougars who are having more struggles? I think it's feasible. I think it is more likely that when you look at the Cincinnati Hogs and how great their defense has been playing, which I don't know that you can expect to continue throughout the course of the season. Right? Like, let's pull up some more numbers here. let's look at the defense here. So yeah, the Hogs defense leads the league in sacks, and it's not even close. Like right now, the Dreadnoughts have 24 sacks. The Miners, we have 23, as do the Austin Armadillos. The Dreadnoughts have 24 sacks collectively as a defense. That is 8 fewer than the Hogs have on defense. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's a big difference. I see you guys talking about Shivers here. Yes. Not Shivers, but the Hogs rushing attack as a whole is 9th in the league. Where is Shivers actually ranking? I mean, he could be higher than that. Looking at Shivers, he's 7th. So right now, Shivers is 7th in the league in rushing yards at 411. And he's 3rd, it looks like, in total carries. So averaging just over 4 yards a carry. So I don't object to the idea that Dre Shivers could continue to do what he's doing. For those of you that have been in the league for a while, you know who Dre Shivers is. You know he's a good running back. And could he, at the end of the year, be top 10 in the RFL in rushing yards? Sure, why not? But I think in order for the Hogs to be a team that we look at and say, you know, this is an unbelievable team, other elements of the offense are going to have to pick it up. Because I don't envision the Hogs having 150 sacks on the season. And right now, what did we say? They have 32? They're on pace for like 170 sacks this year. I mean, that's insane asylum. Like, that's Looney Tunes. I just don't envision that happening. And then the other thing I don't envision happening is Ronnie Shanahan getting his play up to some astronomical level, right? Like, the best case scenario for Ronnie Shanahan this year is he finishes inside the top half. Like, that's best case scenario. Do I envision a scenario where Ronnie Shanahan finishes the year top 10 in yards? No. Top 10 in touchdowns? No. Top 10 in QBR? No. But in order for the Hogs to continue this, I think he needs to get himself much closer to top 18, top 15. And if he can do that, then I think that will help eliminate some of what the defense might start to give back as the season goes on. What did I say? 160? Did I multiply by 4 instead of 3? What do you have? 32. Yeah, I must have multiplied by 4 instead of 3. Yeah, Hodge, they're on pace for 100. So they're on pace for 109 sacks, which is insane. Mick says 15 of those sacks were against them. I'm laughing because that sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. But I guess in your defense, Rob, it's 2 games, right? Like at least you're not sitting here saying you got sacked 15 times in one game, because that would be something that only the Miners could do to you. Oh wait, sorry. So that's it. We all love a good story, and I think it's about time Ronnie Shanahan gets a little bit of pub. I think he's the best rookie quarterback that is playing on a regular basis right now. There's not a lot of them. But I do believe that in order for the Hogs to get to where they think they might be at right now, there's got to be continued improvement, which isn't a knock on the team, and it's not a knock on Ronnie Shanahan. It's just kind of stating what I believe to be the obvious. But to other people, it's not always obvious. I think trading Buck Ulbrich for a first-round pick was an obvious decision to make. Some of you might not. I'm actually genuinely curious. Is there anyone out there that, like, would you have made that move? If you were the general manager of the Sacramento Miners, or even if you're not, if you're just a fan of the league, on the surface, right now, one day after the trade, do you like the Voyager side of it, or do you like the Miners side of it? Because I think that I would like to think that there's more people that would take the Miners side of it. However, maybe I'm wrong. Certainly Baker thinks I'm wrong. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made the deal, right? Look at this. Another guy in here I've never even seen before. This is my favorite. Aspect of doing these shows for you guys is the new people. So who on earth is Mosey Ibarra? And I'm sorry if I butchered your name, but maybe your profile picture should not be a screenshot of yourself trying to take a picture. New Baylor guy. Love it. Baylor Brotherhood. Mosey, welcome to the RFL community. For you, my friend, you might not know this. I've got a few Baylor guys on my team right now. So good luck in the league. I have no idea what position you're playing. But yeah, I'm sure some of the guys in the Miners locker room will keep an eye out for you. It depends on how the Voyagers finish. Well, no, it doesn't. That's the whole point. You don't make the trade knowing how they're going to finish. You don't get the benefit of like waiting 3 months to decide who won the trade. At that point, it'll probably be pretty clear. If the Voyagers don't make the playoffs, well, then this is a one-sided trade. I think ultimately, if you're the Voyagers, you're looking at this and saying, we got to win. And I know that we're 2-3 right now, but we got to turn it around. And we're going to turn it around now. And Buck Ulbrich is going to help us. And Griffin Goodman is going to protect the line. And we're going to figure out this quarterback situation. Whether that means we're going back to Glenn Hay or whether that means it's Monte Wyatt. Regardless of what it is, the Voyagers have to figure that out. Which is actually something that, to me, is pretty intriguing. right? Like you bench your superstar quarterback for performance. You give the young kid a shot. And then after one start, you turn around and you acquire a superstar wide receiver and a strong superstar offensive lineman. That tells the rookie quarterback or the second year quarterback, my coach has my back. I would assume that Glenn Hayes' days of taking snaps under center in Houston are over. Now that's just me. Monte Wyatt could struggle the next month and then Glenn Hayes back in there. But just like I said about Ajon Grant, the reason you make the trade, the reason I make the trade to move on from Buck Ulbrich is to give a guy like Ajon Grant an opportunity to play. Why? I said it already. Because ages 21, 22, 23, those are when you want guys to be developing. The best way to get guys to develop quickly is to let them play. And I understand it's a gray area because I don't want to throw out 68 overall players just so that I can get them playing time, just so that they can accumulate stats, just so that they can build up XP, just so that they can develop. But I do want to throw out 73 overall, 74 overall guys as a rookie and give them a chance to play at the expense of an 81 or an 82 overall who's 28, 29, 30 years old. Yes, that much I will do. Because there's an opportunity for Ajon Grant to be the same overall as Buck Ulbrich next season, which is wild to think right now because Buck Ulbrich is an 85. Ajon Grant is a 77. But it's very feasible between now and the end of the year for a guy like Ajon Grant to develop, earn XP, and get himself from a 77 to an 80, maybe even mess around and get an 81, get himself to a B minus. And then at the end of the year, a guy like Buck Ulbrich goes through a little bit of regression. And now instead of an 85, he drops down to an 81. And now all of a sudden I'm going into next season and I'm saying, Buck Ulbrich would have been the third best receiver on my team going into this year. And I would have only had one first round pick. But instead, I have 2 first round picks. When you're talking about the third best receiver on your team, he could be a 75, he could be an 80. It doesn't really matter. If you have a 95 overall wide receiver as your third receiver, it doesn't mean as much. All that means is your receiving core is loaded. And if your third receiver is a 95, well, then that means your 1 and 2s, are staring down the barrel of a 99. So the added benefit of having that 90 plus wide receiver 3, it's not that great. Give me 2 90 plus receivers at 1 and 2, and then I'll take a 75, 76 as my 3. So I think the rest of the season is going to be interesting. Try to see if I can identify some other trends here. See if there's anything you guys want to see. Any you didn't miss much, Smitty. I want to ask. Oh, here's a question. We got a question here from Mr. Calling Home, who I believe was JJ Harris. I want to ask you, Dunn, how do you turn your season around, and do you believe this trade helps you achieve that turnaround? How do I turn the season around? I don't know. Do I believe this trade helps me achieve that turnaround? Not at all. No. This trade doesn't help me achieve a turnaround because you can't trade away two of your biggest players in terms of overall on the same side of the ball, which is the side of the ball that you're having trouble on to begin with, and expect a big turnaround. You just can't, right? And if anybody were to answer this, so JJ, if anybody were to answer this, the second part of that question with a yes, that person is who I was describing earlier as an average, ordinary general manager. That person doesn't have a chance. That's a general manager that can't get to that next level. Because it can't help your turnaround. Unless you're talking about turnaround for the future. We're in uncharted waters right now. The Sacramento Miners are in an area that they've never been in. And while actually I believe there may have been a season where we started 2-4 and we ultimately came back and won the division, we did that with the benefit of automatic wins. We don't have the benefit of automatic wins anymore. And one of the hidden benefits of automatic wins is it immediately stops the bleeding of morale. And right now, we are hemorrhaging morale. We have an 80 overall quarterback who we're trying to develop to get better. And every week he's basically regressing because the team morale is going down. And so now he's not playing at an 80. Miles has been playing the last 4 games of the season at like a 77 overall because of team morale. It just is what it is. It sucks. There's nothing you can do about it. We've been forced into situations that were beyond our control that ultimately have a role in the team morale. Then you turn around and you lose a couple games. That hurts the team morale. And so rather than having a second-year 80 overall quarterback that you're optimistic about getting up to an 83, 84, 85, and then maybe with the morale getting to an 86 or 87, right now we have the reverse. And we're obviously we're not the only team that has this. But that's something that you guys don't realize happens on a weekly basis in this league. Like Miles entered the league as a 70. Within his first 20 games in the league, he's gone from a 70 to an 80. And now, unfortunately, with morale being the way that it is, he's dropped in terms of how he plays on a day-to-day basis. His overall is not dropped, but the game day overall, if you will, has dropped. He's an 80 overall, but he's not playing at an 80 overall level. And the only way to fix that is to start winning games. And that's something that you guys don't see. That's not something that's talked about all that often. You guys don't realize that when a team loses, You want to know what you want to see what I'm talking about? Why don't you jump in the DMs and go at Rob right now and have him pull up his roster and have him just take a look at the negatives that he has on his team right now because they're 0-5. I've got an 80 overall quarterback that's playing as a 78, I believe. I've got an 80 overall wide receiver that's playing as a 77. I've got a 92 overall running back that's playing at like a 90. I mean, that's still good, fine, but these things suck. But it's always been there. We all know this. This isn't, ooh, boo-hoo, poor me. This isn't a pity party. It just is what it is. It's the way that the league is. It's the way that Madden is. It's not even the league. This isn't even a byproduct of the league in any way, shape, or form. This isn't anything to do with like the league. This is simply just Madden. With morale the way that it is, there's ebbs and flows. And as we get further and further into the season, it's going to get more and more drastic. If we lose, we've got the kickoff game on Monday night against the Thunderbirds. If we lose that game, that'll be a 4-game losing streak. I can't imagine what the morale of the locker room is going to look like. It sucks. It's terrible. But it's something that, as a general manager, you have to navigate and you have to deal with. And it's why depth is important. Because some guys morale hits differently than others. Your number one wide receiver struggles, it might affect his morale quite a bit. Your number 3 wide receiver struggles, it might not affect his morale as much. Also, we'll have to look at the personality of some of the players. It's tough. All right, so we'll take a quick peek at some other stuff. So great question, JJ. I appreciate it. If anyone else has any other questions, by all means. I didn't have a chance to jump on last week after week 4. And I didn't have a chance to do anything again because I've been sick all week. I didn't have a chance to do a post game or anything after our loss this week. So if you have questions on the state of the team, if you have questions like JJ here about the trade, whatever it is, I'm all ears. I'm all for it. Yeah, you got to start. What's somebody say? Got to start praying for scenario boost. Yeah. Yeah. You got to start praying for a lot of things, Smitty. But yeah, there's a lot. Fortunately for us, the defensive side of the ball, it's not that bad. And when you've got guys like Killian Bain tearing it up, winning defensive player of the week, it's a perk. Speaking of perk, shout out to you, Cam Perkins, for returning back to the field. Good to finally have you back on the field. I know that your teammates appreciate it. Appreciate seeing you out there. This is a good one. I'm going to So Rob asked the question here, and this is what I appreciate, guys. So I say this, and Rob is very similar to me, I believe, in this regard. I don't care what you think about my question. If I have a question, I'm going to ask it. And I don't care what you think about my response or my opinion or my answer. But if I have an answer, I'm going to give it. And that's the way that I am. That's the way that Miners Live is. That's just the way that this goes. And I believe that to a large degree, Rob is pretty similar. And so this is the question that Rob is asking, but you guys have all probably been thinking. And so I appreciate Rob being the one to ask it. I just wish that other people out there would be as open and willing to potentially say things like this that could cause a reaction, right? Rob. Okay, so let's rewind 4 minutes ago, right? Rob is sitting there watching this show, listening to me talk about the team and the trade and all that. And he decides to get down, put his head down, and he's like, I got him. I'm going to get, okay, you know what? How about this one? You want a question done? I got a question for you. Here you go. How about this? What you think about that? And he types into his little chat bar what you see here on your screen. So is the season over for you done? I was asked this recently. I want to answer this as yes or no as possible, but I don't think that it can really be answered yes or no. Even though I would love to, that's probably what you want. You probably want yes or no. Do I think that the season is over in terms of us making the playoffs? Yes. I would lean towards yes. I have a hard time thinking that, listen, I wouldn't have made the trade if I didn't. Right? Like I can't sit here on my high horse and preach to you guys as much as I do about identifying when it's time to sell and sell. As soon as you recognize that your team is not going to win, sell whatever parts you can and build for the future. I say that all of the time. I say a lot of things all the time, and that is one of them. I say that your college career doesn't matter. You shouldn't waste reloads in college. And I don't care about what you did in college. I say that all the time. I say that the RFL is more important than college. I say that all the time. And then I also say all the time, as soon as you recognize that your team isn't in position to win a reload bowl, or maybe your goal is to just get to the playoffs, and then on any given Sunday, you can find a nut and make a run. If that's your goal, fine. But that's not my goal. And you guys all know that's not my goal because half of you criticize me and tell me that winning the division doesn't matter because I've lost in the playoffs. I've lost in the first round 3 years in a row. Excuse me for being so good that we win the division every year. I never realized that was going to be a bad thing to win the division every year until I met you guys. So in terms of making the playoffs, I don't. Could we get lucky? And would I recognize it as being lucky? Yes, I would. If suddenly this right here is the kick in the fanny that this team needs, and now Ajon getting bumped to an everyday starter, which, by the way, that will happen on Monday night. Ajon will be a starter. If Ajon Grant getting starting wide receiver reps, is a boost somehow to the team, and we can turn this around, and maybe over the course of the next 10 games, we go 6-4, and now we are 7-8 on the season at that point, and we have 2 games left, and we win them, and we go 9-8, and somehow 9-8 gets us in the playoffs. I don't know how, because I don't think 9-8 would possibly get a wild card. I think the only way 9-8 gets in is if you win the division. And I don't know how the hell we're going to win the division at 9-8 when the St. Louis Aviators are 5-0. So I just don't, again, you asked the question, and I'm being realistic. I just don't know. And I'm sorry to the guys in the locker room. I truly am. I'm sorry for whatever I may have done to put us into this position. I'm sorry that you are listening to this right now and thinking, oh my God, our coach doesn't believe in us. That's not the truth. As a matter of fact, it couldn't be further from the truth. Your coach believes in you so much that he traded away the old heads in the room to give you more opportunities. That's the way you should be thinking about it. So, Rob, I don't think we're going to make the playoffs. I think this is the first year in 4 years that the Sacramento Miners won't be in the playoffs. But on the same token, I recognize that already, and I wouldn't have made this trade if I didn't think that was realistic. So it kind of just is what it is at this point. I'm curious what your answer was, because I'm 1-4, and I feel like between the two of us in better positioned to make a comeback, certainly because I'm not 0-5, but also just looking at the roster, feeling like I'm better positioned to make a comeback. And so I'm saying that I'm curious what you think, because I've already said this about the Cougars. I've already said this about you. You've already traded away an older guy in the room. So in my opinion, you already to some degree identified this, and that was before the season even started. Whether that's ultimately truly what you did, maybe that's not what you meant by it, but I could very easily see that Markel Wilcox trade as, okay, they're already recognizing this and good on them. That being said, I would have been trading Markel Wilcox for, well, you did get a first-round draft pick, so I guess it is kind of the same thing. What do we got here? Oh, Smitty, what are you doing? Reloads in college could make you, though, not going to lie. When CS8 comes, whatever you have, you can spend at the beginning of the season before it starts. That can make a guy a stud. Wait, so you're saying that whatever reloads guys have before the season starts, they can keep? So the only reloads they're going to have are reloads that basically they're earning right now. And they can use them. It's fine. It's fine. I mean, I think can make a guy a stud is, it's debatable. I think performance on the field is going to make a guy a stud. Ultimately, their draft card is going to be determined by how they play, not by what their attributes are. So, but whatever their highest attribute is isn't going to be any higher. Like I don't know. I'm just not a big believer in spending a ton of reloads in college, unless, of course, you just have so many that you have to spend because you're going to lose them anyway. Oh, here we go. What Rob got here? I believe that we are on the outside looking in. Gee, thanks, Captain Obvious. Tell him what he's won, Marv. You can get a consolation prize for that comment, Rob. That's all you get. You do not pass go. You do not collect $200. At best, you're getting a participation trophy for that lazy comment. I believe that we are on the outside looking in. Oh, really? I believe you have the worst record in the league. That's not on the outside looking in. You didn't even get invited to the party. Outside looking in. I told the Cougars we were not going to be too good this year. What's your definition of too good? Did you tell them you were going to be 0-5? I joke. I kid. What do we got here from QPOC? I feel like if your attributes are already decent and you're just not playing well, you might as well save because you're not staying with those attributes anyway. And I think that's part of my point. I think QPOC probably is a little bit more in line with me on this. Whatever your attributes are in college are not going to be what they are when you join the RFL. So if you're a linebacker and you have 75 tackle in college, you can boost that 75 tackle up to 80 tackle while you're in college. That's great. But chances are when you enter the RFL, you're probably going to have 75 tackle anyway. You might not be entering the RFL at 80 tackle. So it's not something that everyone's to each their own. I'm not going to convince you guys of every belief that I have, but if you ask me, I will tell you, I would much rather you save your reloads so that you can use them as a rookie week 1 and upgrade as a member of the Sacramento Miners, not as a member of the Baylor Bears. That's just me. Some of you guys care more about college. That's fine. I mean, it's not fine because I don't like it, but nothing I'm going to do, nothing I can do about it. Let's see. Oh, welcome to the RFL Reflection Hour. I am your host, Chris Dunn. With me today, I have Rob Roby, head coach and general manager of the Chicago Cougars, who says that as soon as he saw his quarterback in Sims, he knew it would be disastrous. Did he think it would be this bad? No. End quote. Go on with your day. I mean, that's rough. That's rough. Okay, so Kenzo, how many reloads? This is. Let's just do this. Let's just do a real world example. Kenzo, how many reloads do you have? I will wait. Still waiting. 175,000. Okay. That's an astronomical number of reloads. So in this example, if you have 175,000 reloads and you're not going to lose them at the end of the RFL season, and you're going to be able to keep every single one of those when College Series 8, I believe it's 8, starts, then sure, why not? Because you're capped, you're maxed on the number. I believe you can only upgrade once every 4 weeks. And so that's going to give you a maximum of 3 upgrade periods in college, right? Maybe if you get to the national championship game, you get a 4th. Maybe there's a week 16 if you get to the national championship. So best case scenario is you've got 4 upgrade periods. If you've got 175,000 reloads, you could basically do student of the game every single time and still have reloads left over. Student of the games would get you to 200,000. You've got 175, but over the course of the season, you're going to earn another 25 to cover that anyway. So yes, if you've got 175,000 and you wanted to do that, fine. You can use some, but I don't think that you should be using all of them, because nothing would frustrate me more as a GM to know that Kenzo had 175,000 reloads in college and spent them all. And now he enters the RFL as a rookie, 71 overall, and has 0 reloads. I would much rather you enter the RFL as a 69 overall with 100,000 reloads. I guess my point in all of this is the increase that you're potentially going to get in draft day overall does not outweigh the amount of increase you're going to receive at the RFL level when you boost every 4 weeks. Again, I go back to some of my own personal locker room examples. Miles McCain entered the league as a 70. I think he's a 79 or an 80 right now. He went up 10, 9 or 10 overall points in basically just over 1 season. Killian Bain is an 85 overall, I think, right now. I think he entered as a 73 or a 74. He's gone up 11 or 12 overall in that same amount of time. You're not going to, no matter how many reloads you spend in college, you're not going to take your, what would have been a 68 overall player, and because you spent so many reloads in college, turn him into a draft day overall of 79. It's just not going to happen. The median range of overalls on draft day are like on the high end, 76. And that's like the best player in the draft, to like a 66. Like in the grand scheme of things, there's like a range of 10 overall when it comes to guys in the draft. You typically don't see guys higher than 76, certainly not anymore. And you're not often seeing guys below 66. And if you are, they're practice squad guys, or they're getting cut anyway. And so, yes, Kenzo, if you have 175,000 reloads and you want a week 1 of the college series, take your player. I don't know a ton about your player. I know you reached out to me recently, which shout out to you. I always appreciate guys reaching out, especially guys that I don't know much about and I can, follow along and reach out to. But I promise you, your day 1 status in the RFL is not going to change nearly as much as you think it is, commensurate with the amount of reloads you're going to end up spending. And so if it were me, I'd rather you keep those 175,000 reloads and come into Sacramento Miners training camp and preseason week 1, student of the game, +5. 4 weeks later, student of the game, +5. In 2 upgrades, you could go up 3 overalls. And it's way easier to do that in the RFL than it is in college. It's just facts. It's easier to do it in the RFL. Oh, and by the way, that's where it matters. And I know that's hard for some guys, especially guys in Miami and guys at Baylor and guys at Ohio State, right? Like you got a locker room full of 10 guys and you think it's the coolest thing in the world. And I'll take that a step further. If any of you guys are playing 4 years in college, can you please do me a favor and raise your hand in the chat right now if you plan on staying 4 years in college. If you have a college player and you plan on staying all 4 years in college, put like the hand up emoji or whatever in the chat because I would like to know. This is your 4th year? How this doesn't make sense to me. How Smitty, how is this possible? Have you been all 4 years at Miami? And if this is your 4th year, then that means you're going to enter the RFL as like a 24-year-old. Like, as far as I know, you get 2 years in college. Anything more than 2, your age goes up a year. So if you spend 3 years in college, then instead of being 21 years old, you're 22 years old. If you stay 4 years, instead of being 22 years old, you're 23 years old. And this is where all this drives me crazy and drives me nuts. Because under no circumstances do I think guys should be playing 4 years in college. There's no scenario where it's good for you. You're going to enter the RFL at 23 years old. If you enter the RFL at 23 years old, you should retire your player and create another one. That's just the harsh reality. Like there's nothing you can do. The best case scenario is you're going to enter the league as like a 75 overall. If you're the best player in the draft, you're a 75 or a 76 overall. We've seen it. Smitty has said it. Gone are the days where guys are entering at 80, 81, 82. I know. I knew Smitty was going to say this. And good for you, Smitty, for saying it. But it's the truth. He doesn't want me to say it, but it's the truth. Don't say that. What he's telling me not to say is if you enter the RFL at 23, you should retire your player and create a new one. He's telling me not to say it because he recognizes it, and he's laughing because he recognizes it. And the reason he recognizes it is because he believes it also. Guys, don't stay in college for 4 years. Like Miles McCain is 22 years old. Okay, here's a better example. Killian Bain is 22 years old. He's an 84 or 85 overall. I wasn't joking when I told you he could win Defensive Player of the Year at 22 years old. And you want to tell me that you're going to enter the RFL as a rookie and you're older than he is? Come on, dude. Look at, I think it's Matthew Holbrook. Okay, this is an exercise in Matthew Holbrook. Okay, this is the guy that you guys should all be. We should have like a clause. It should be like the Matthew Holbrook conundrum or the Matthew Holbrook clause, I guess, is the better way of putting it. So let me find this guy because most of you guys don't know who this is. All right, let me see here. Holbrook, right? Did I get him? No. Where is it? Somebody help me out. Did I get his name wrong? Is it not Holbrook? Where is he? Holman, right? Yes. Okay. Classic example. Matthew Holman. Let me pull this up real quick. I wonder if I can. Let's see if I can do this. All right. See if I can pull this up real quick. Okay, so here's Matthew Holman. I hope you guys can see this. Matthew Holman is a 76 overall, which is great. All right, cool. Star Dev, 76 overall running back. I will also tell you, this is Matthew Holman's third year in the league. So to be in the league for 3 years and to get up to a 76, okay, that's fine. If you enter the league as a 70, you develop a little slowly. Maybe you're behind a Kingston Kenny type, right? Like you're not getting a lot of playing time. I get it. A 76 overall running back can still have really good attributes and can be really good. Look at these attributes. 90 speed. Okay. 91 acceleration. Great. 90 agility, 90 change of direction, 85 carrying. I'd like to see a little bit more in the strength department, but the ball carrier vision is an 84, the juke move 86, spin move 80. Clearly he's a little bit more of a elusive back, not a power back. The dude is 27 years old. He's 27. He's older than half the running backs in the league. Why? Because when he entered the league, he was 25. Do you know what chance Matthew Holman has of being a superstar in the RFL? I, for one, can count that high. The percentage is 0. And it's all because he entered the league at 25. If Matthew Holman were a 22-year-old right now, which is what he would have been, he'd be 76 overall. He'd be a 22-year-old. He's not getting a lot of run. But maybe he'd be more likely to get a little bit more run if he didn't have a bunch of gray hair underneath the do-rag. That's my point. Do not stay for 4 years. As soon as you recognize that your guy is going to get drafted and you think that he's going to get drafted in the top 3 rounds, I think you go. There are a few instances of players staying an extra year and reaping huge reward for it. And I think back, and I want to say one of those guys was Brock Frederick, right? I remember being critical of Brock Frederick. Hold on. Okay. I didn't even read it all the way, but I promise you the answer is no. So if a guy came in after doing 4 years at 24 years old, a 79 or an 80 overall, he consistently stacks reloads and starts his rookie season, You're not taking that guy. Well, first of all, let me address the elephant in the room, Smitty. You're never having a guy enter the league as an 80. Because if you do, you're going to have some splaining to do in the coach's lounge to a lot of us. And so, but no, I'm not. It's not even debatable for me. And I'm appalled at any other general manager out there that I guess, Smitty, I'll give you the benefit. I'll give you this benefit. What position does this guy play? Yeah, I know we had guys come in at 80 and 81. And in the moment you said it'll never happen again. You gave birth to Calvin Poole and he was only a 78. Like, no one's coming in any higher than that. So what position does this guy play? He's 24 years old. I'm going to say he's a 79 because you and I both know you're not giving anybody an 80. Yeah. And so this is another one that you and I strongly disagree on. And I think most other guys probably disagree on. This is really not the way that it works in real life. So it's hard to swallow this pill in the RFL. The best players in the draft are the guys that leave early. The best players in the draft aren't graduate seniors. Like, it's more important to have a 22-year-old. I'd much rather have a 21-year-old or a 22-year-old than a 24-year-old. So, like, I guess to go back to the initial question, if there's a 24-year-old in the draft and he's a 79 overall, or I can draft Killian Bain, let's say it's a linebacker. If Tyler Cage came into the league at 24 years old and he was a 79 overall, would I rather have Killian Bain at 74 overall, 21 years of age? 100%. Every single time. And it's not even close. Because look at what you can do in 1 year. Look at what you can do in 2 years. And you're giving me 3 years. You're giving me 3 years. Now, granted, I get it. If you're a team looking to win right now, you get the higher overall player earlier. Like, I get that the 79 overall player is a 79 right now. But that 79 overall player, the highest he's going to get in 1 year, his development is skewed. So at 21, Killian Bain has gone up 11 overalls. At 24, that guy's not going up more than 4 overalls, 5 overalls. Again, he's stacking reloads, so fine. He can get a little bit. But your XP boosts, they're going to be harder to come by. You'll probably get 1, maybe 2 XP boosts per season as opposed to 4, which is what 21-year-olds can sometimes get. And maybe I'm wrong. Listen, maybe there are more GMs out there that feel that way. And maybe this is just where I am different. But this is where I have a hard time when in the real world, no NFL GM is drafting a 24-year-old with a first-round draft pick. Well, I shouldn't say that. We just saw it with the quarterback position, and it was highly controversial. It was extremely controversial when we saw it. And people do crazy things at the quarterback position. teams draft quarterbacks simply because they have to have one, when the reality is they don't have to have one in the draft. And they reach and they take guys that they shouldn't. Every single year, there's 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round. And the reality is 2 of them will probably end up 5 years from now being worthy of that draft spot. But outside of quarterback, no, it's not even close. And in the case of Matthew Holman, running back, get out of here. Matthew Holman's going to have more years success in college than he does in the RFL. Right? Like, that's obviously a bit facetious because Matthew Holman was a product of him giving himself the age, not actually staying for all 4 years. But if you give me a 25-year-old, this is why I ask this every year. I say every year, I want to know the ages of every single draft prospect. Because I guess to answer the question, no, I won't draft him. I won't draft a 24-year-old. I just won't do it. I don't care if it's Euro Winbush. I don't care if you can sell me on Euro Winbush being a 78 overall and Steve Washington being a 73 overall. That's fine. I'm not taking a 24-year-old. I don't think Euro Winbush was 24. I think for some odd reason he was able to come into the league at 22, which, again, I don't understand. But that's where I think there needs to be some clarity on what determines how old a guy is going to be in the draft. Because clearly, as you guys can see right here, we have a difference of opinion. Smitty feels one way, I feel another. He feels firmly one way, I feel firmly the other way. And I don't think we could be any more opposite. In my opinion, if you're 21 years old and you ball out in year 1, get out. That's the guy I want. That's the guy I want. That's why I drafted Steve Washington. He was in the league 1 year, dominated, won best running back in the league. See you later. That's what guys do in real life. In real life, when you are in college and you dominate and you're the best player, you leave. You don't stick around. You leave. You leave for the prospects of pro ball. And I just look at it differently. I think that if you can ball out and you can be identified as the best at your position and only have to play 1 year, that's more impressive than someone being there for 4 years. Bo Nix doesn't impress me for playing in college for 6 years. JJ McCarthy doesn't impress me for playing for 4 or 5 years. Those things don't impress me. Travis Hunter in year 1 impresses me. Now, obviously, those guys don't have the luxury of coming out after, in real life, you don't have the luxury of being one and done. I wish we did. Otherwise, we'd have Ryan Smith. The fact that we get to watch Ryan Smith in college for the next 2 years, I hate it. I hate every minute of it. I want him to be draft eligible right now. He would arguably be the number 1 pick in the draft right now. Why do we have to wait 2 more years? And so, that's where my thought process is. That's where I get wildly confused, because by the logic that Smitty is saying, which I just don't buy, is that Ryan Smith at Ohio State has to go back to Ohio State for 2 more years. And then if he does this again for 2 more years, then he earns that 79 overall. But if Ryan Smith were to go right now, he wouldn't. I mean, that's the best player in the country, period. Give me the young guy. And maybe I'm different. But I want the 21-year-old 73, not the 24-year-old 76. Because that 21-year-old 73 will be a 76 by the time he's 22. So now I've got a 22-year-old 76, and you've got a 24-year-old not 76 because he moved up a little bit. I mean, if your guy entered the league at 76 and he was 24, and I can get my guy to that same overall, but 2 years younger, isn't that better? That's just me. So go back to the chat here for a second. Yeah, so this is what Smitty's saying. I just don't agree. And I mean, it is what it is. We can agree to disagree. I also feel like if you were to pull, if you were to take this and you were to put this in the coaches lounge and you were to ask if we all agree with this, I think you would be in the minority. And maybe I'm wrong. But you can have one good season, but one season is not enough to put you past someone who has been consistent for an extra year or two. If I'm better, I'm better. Just because the other guy was consistent doesn't mean he's better. It just means he did it an extra year. Right? So having 15 touchdowns and 1,200 yards 2 years in a row, is that better than having 18 touchdowns and 2,000 yards in your first year? Right? But I'm going to be honest, Smitty. I don't know. This college class is, I got to go back and do a lot. If a guy had a better year than Dylan Lewis right now, he should have a higher overall. How long has Dylan Lewis been in the league? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't this the first year that Dylan Lewis balled out? So if Dylan Lewis needed 3 years, if he needed a year or 2 years development time in order to get to this point that he just got to, Dylan Lewis was what? Quarterback at Oklahoma? CS5? Is that who we're talking about? So he was in College Series 5, College Series 6. And College Series 7. And then he's playing College Series 8. So, okay, let's do this example. What you're telling me is that Dylan Lewis has 4 years in the College Series, which means he's going to enter the RFL at 24 years old. I'm not talking about his performance at all. I mean, he's not entering at 24. Well, then how old is he entering? He's entering at 23. Because otherwise, this makes zero sense. For a guy to play 4 years in college and enter the draft 1 year older than the guys that are playing 1 year in college. Like, I don't need to let that sink in. It should be pretty common. It should be easy to understand. That doesn't make any sense. And there's literally nothing that you can say to make that make sense. He could have entered last year. He could have entered prior to that. So we're talking about a guy who's twice passed up entering the draft. If you can enter the draft your very first time, you should be 21. That's the youngest you can be. If you then pass up the draft, then when you enter the next eligible draft, you should be 22. If you then pass that up again, you should then be 23. Like, it's, I mean, it is what it is. You're not okay. So you love me or hate me, for better or for worse. Let's play devil's advocate. We're not taxing guys, right? What did Forbes say? Because of the delay, we're not punishing guys on their ages. Okay. We're not punishing guys on their ages. Correct. We're punishing everybody else. Because basically we're saying you can stay. You can stay and get better and spend more reloads if you want. You're not going to get a year older, which is going to help you. You're going to be able to spend more reloads, which can help you. And we're openly saying that if you do so, your overall on draft day is going to be higher than the guys that don't. So we're actively, right? We're actively promoting guys to stay because they can get better and not have to worry about their age going up. That's what we're doing. And I say that for two reasons. One, I don't think that's what most of us want. And I also question whether or not some people realize that's the byproduct. What do you mean we're not promoting? I mean, I wasn't going anywhere with it until I felt like I was on an island for saying something that was completely kind of commonsensical. And to be fair, I've been saying for years now, we all sit here and we all agree that the RFL is the league and College Series isn't. But yet we're trying to get people to stay. Pecan, you can say it's not promoting. Okay, well, if there's no negative to staying, then it's kind of like promoting doing it. I've said for years. So like, where am I going with this? I've said for years, I think that the guys entering the draft, their ages are weird. And I understand that the year hiatus, fine. If this is the only year that it's done that way, I don't feel like that's the case. I feel like there's been an unclear line in the sand of how old guys are going to be and what determines how old a guy is in the draft. That's all I'm saying. And as an aside, I also feel that if you're in college for 3 years, that doesn't make you automatically a higher overall than a guy who's in college for 1. That's just me. It's not really anything that we need to discuss. It's not like it's going to matter. Not like I'm going to convince anybody. This is confusing. These have all been posted. What have all been posted? The age of every single user, the age of every single draft eligible player. That hasn't been posted. I've asked for that for years. I don't know. This went way too far off on a tangent. But all right, if guys are going to enter the league at 24, we're going to have 23-year-olds entering the league as 80 overalls. And I'm going to spend my 2 first-round draft picks on guys that have been in college for 4 years. That's what I'm going to have to do. But at that point, the Cincinnati Hogs will be undefeated, right, guys? All right, let's see. What else we got? Yeah, I get it. You guys aren't getting my larger point. All right. What time is it? I'm at 2.5 hours. I'm getting out of here. Oh, here we go. Okay. Wyatt Harris. But this is so far not the equivalent of what this doesn't mean what you think it means. Not every single player. And I don't understand how people don't see that. And let's look at the real world. Let's look at Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers could have come out of the draft 3 years. Quinn Ewers could have come out of the draft and he would have been a top 10 pick in the draft. He didn't. He stayed. Now his draft stock's gone down. He hasn't played terribly. He hasn't played exceptionally better than he did. He's just sort of been the same Quinn Ewers for 3 years. And his draft stock has gone down because of it. Like, I'm not trying to penalize guys for being consistent. I'm trying to penalize guys for losing development years in the league that matters. Like, you're wrong if you think that having a 21 or a 22-year-old in the NFL isn't significantly better than having a 23-year-old or a 24-year-old. That's not really an opinion. Like, break down position by position. Like there are numerous analytics. If there's a 20-year-old in the NFL draft, that dude is being taken, and he's being taken early. If you go look back, I mean, running back's a bad example because they have short shelf lives. But if you go back and you look at the draft capital spent on a running back, they're all prior to the draft, prior to draft day, 20 or 21. And that's the running back. I get it. It's a little bit different because you want guys to be as young as possible because the running back position gets older and ages out. I get all that. But the same holds at other positions. If you are a general manager, don't you want the guy to be in your professional locker room, developing with pros, developing with Pro Bowlers, developing with grown men, veterans of the league? That's the only point I'm trying to make. This isn't about Wyatt Harris or Dylan Lewis or Jaden Young or any of those other guys. The simple fact is, give me a guy who's 21. Like I guess more than anything, I think I'm just shocked. I'm shocked that there are so many people that disagree with me on this. Like if I'm going through franchise mode and I am doing my draft scouting and I have 3 guys and all of them are, pretty close, I'm taking the guy that's youngest. Like, and I guess more than anything, I'm not trying to be critical here. I feel like I said what I said my opinion, and then suddenly I'm the one being attacked for having the opinion, but I'm just shocked genuinely that people don't also feel that way. I mean, Wyatt Harris is the best defensive tackle in college. He has been for 3 years. But he could have been drafted. He was draft eligible last year and he didn't go. So for me, it makes no sense for Wyatt Harris to enter the draft any younger than 22. And that's not punishing him because of the delay. He made the choice to go back. Well, guess what happens when you go back to school? 365 days roll off the calendar and you get another birthday. And I don't know anybody that goes from 21 years old to 21 years old. So do I think Wyatt Harris is the best defensive tackle in the league? Yes. But if there was another defensive tackle that put up similar numbers just this past year, and I thought he was going to be a year younger, would I entertain taking him? Maybe. Again, Pecan, I don't think Wyatt Harris is the hill you want to die on, because Wyatt Harris is the exception to the rule. He has been the number one player at his position the entire time. And it's not really been close. There's not really anybody that's been close to Wyatt Harris. The guys where I think we're having the conversation are other positions where it's debatable. You want to talk about quarterback position. You want to talk about running back. You want to talk about linebacker. There's debate on who the number one guy is. There's not really debate here. And I know you appreciate that because Wyatt Harris is your boy. But Wyatt Harris is just not, I don't think he's the example that you really want to use here. Because I could make an argument that Wyatt Harris is the first player picked in the draft. It is what it is. All right. What else we got here? I'm going to get out of here in a minute. So any questions? Anyone has any questions or anything you want to see on week 5, now that week 5 is in the books and we head into week 6? Questions on standings, questions on stats. We've got a couple guys. See if I can find any outliers here real quick. If I go to take a look at some league leaders real quick. Yeah, I mean, Geno Gannon for the Black Knights not getting enough pub. 16 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Devin Wade for the Brooklyn Bulls. I don't think anybody anticipated 12 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And then here's an interesting stat for you. Quarterback that is number 5. He's 5th in the league in passing yards, but he only has 7 touchdowns. He's 5th in the league in passing yards, and his touchdown to interception ratio is 7-4. And that's DeAndre Wilkins Jr. for the Sentinels. Imagine having over 1,500 yards passing. You're throwing for over 300 yards a game. But you're just not getting the touchdown passes. Which isn't a knock on him, right? I mean, he could be getting him down to the goal line, and then you could have Damani Manuel running it in from the 3-yard line. Right? You could have, Jet Skyback running it in from the 5-yard line. Like, running backs could be getting a lot more run, but kind of a bummer if you're DeAndre Wilkins Jr. to see over 1,500 passing yards, which puts you 5th on that list in terms of passing leaders, but then you've only got 7 touchdowns. Taking a look at some of the running backs. Matt Wheaton, Kingston Kenny, Jacob McDonald, Darius Young, Madison Axel. Those are your top 5 running backs. We talked about Dre Shivers a little bit earlier. He's at 411. Madison Axel is 5th right now at 418. And then you go to the receivers. So this is where I talked earlier about the Austin Armadillos. Jordy Johnson is putting up incredible numbers this year. The same could be said about DeAndre Kane. Both of them have 6 touchdowns. Keith Guyton has 5 touchdowns. Matt Nayani, not a name that we've heard a ton of this year. Certainly an RFL Hall of Famer, but not a name that we've heard a ton of so far this year. 447 yards, but just 2 touchdowns. And then on the defensive side of the ball, pick your poison. What are we looking at? Actually, let's go back to offense here. We talked about DeAndre Wilkins being 5th in yards, but only having 7 touchdowns. Kyle Bain is 5th in touchdowns for the Aviators, and he has 11. So if you look at touchdowns thrown, DeAndre Wilkins, in terms of yards, is 5th on the list. And then in terms of touchdowns, drops down to outside the top 10. We're looking at 17th. So he's 5th in yards, but 17th in touchdowns. And again, doesn't really matter for the quarterback because you can just hand the ball off to the running back. And if the running backs have the difference, then you're fine. If your team has 20 touchdowns, does it really matter what the breakdown is? Not really. I guess your play style, you might like if your team has 20 touchdowns, would you like your quarterback to have 15 and your running backs to have 5? Maybe. Does it matter if your quarterback has 10 and your running backs have 10? Not really. What if your defense has 3, your running backs have 2, and your quarterback has 15? Does any of that matter? Not really. Certainly not right now. So there's touchdowns. Anything that kind of stands out? So Calvin Poole, 9 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Again, this is his first crack at starting. Let's see. Not really anyone else in terms of the quarterback position that. Again, Devin Wade, 12-0 touchdowns to interceptions. That's fantastic. A large reason why the Bulls are where they are right now. Kyle Bain, 11 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Justin Jones, 11 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. To put that in perspective, you might think, oh, well, this is a Madden that we don't have a lot of interceptions. Well, it's not exactly the case. Reed Wagoner, who's a perennial Pro Bowler, an RFL mainstay atop the leaderboards at the quarterback position, he's got 10 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Geno Gannon has 4 interceptions. Timmy Merritt, who won the Relo Bowl last year, has 7 interceptions. So there are interceptions out there. So I think it should not be overlooked at how well Justin Jones, Kyle Bain, and Devin Wade have been performing to simply not turn the ball over. Take a peek at running back. What do we got for running backs? So here's an interesting one. Anthony Savoy currently leads the league in rushing touchdowns at 5. Jordan Granger not far behind with 4. So shout out to Jordan Granger. Rookie doing things for the Lumberjacks. 4 rushing touchdowns. And then Levi Dixon is 5th right now in rushing touchdowns. As much as I criticize the Armadillos for not having a ground game, I still wouldn't say they have a ground game because he's only got 171 yards total in 5 games. That's still abysmal. And by abysmal, I mean terrible. But you don't really need a ground game when Chum Lee throws 12 touchdowns and Jordy Johnson is just uncoverable. He's completely uncoverable. Mix is asking, what about Marquise. Where is Marquise? Let's pull him up. Yeah, if there's anyone that you guys, I'm going to go for another 10 minutes here, guys. So the last 10 minutes, if there's any particular stat, team, category that you want to see, let me know and I'll pull it up here. Here, I think I can actually. I don't think I have another 10 minutes in me. All right, here, I'll share this. So we'll go, let's find Marquise Washington. What about Marquise Washington? Let's find him. Oh, here he is. So looks like in terms of total yards, Marquise Washington is 24th in the league. He's got 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So not great. I'm sorry. That was Gidley. 7 touchdowns, 4 interceptions for Marquise Washington so far. Not great, but, could certainly turn it around a little bit. Who's been sacked the most? That's a lot of sacks. 4 guys have been sacked 24 times, including Miles. Miles has gotten beat up back there. Which is just bizarre to me because our offensive line is like everyone on our offensive line is 80 overall or better. As a matter of fact, they just traded an 85 overall, and we still have, I believe every one of our offensive linemen is going to be 80 overall or better. So a lot of craziness. Let's see. Pecan, did you have someone that you were asking about? No? Let's see. Let's look at some defensive stuff here. Let's go to defensive leaders. I'll just look at overall some individual defensive guys, and then I'll get out of here. Oh, Pecan wants to talk about how competitive the ARC is. Yeah, I mean, let's look. You've got the 4 division leaders. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams right now in the ARC that are either 4-1 or 5-0, which is pretty good. On the flip side, if you go to the NRC, I think to Pecan's point here, the NRC only has 1. So in the ARC, you have 6 teams that are 4-1 or better. And in the NRC, you have 1. And that's the Diablos. And that does not include the likes of the London Bulldogs, the Houston Voyagers, the San Antonio Dreadnoughts, the Sacramento Miners, the Columbus Explorers, the Dallas Desperados, the Atlanta Thunderbirds, the Memphis Steamers. None of those teams are included in that 4-1 or better. And now listen, is 4-1 the end all be all? No. But does it look really good to be 4-1 right now? Yeah. Am I shocked that we still have two teams in the league that are 5-0? Yes. If you remember, I think it was 3 weeks ago, we had 5 teams that were 5-0. And I said at the end of that week, they were going to be down to 2. And I believe all 5 of them won that week. But now we're finally down to 2. And the 2 that we're down to, I think were the 2 that I was least confident in. And they're both in the ARC. So the ARC is, and this is what Pecan is talking about here. Historically, in my opinion, the ARC has always been a little bit more condensed. Like, I feel like historically the NRC always was a little bit more top heavy, right? Like, the NRC may have had the 2 best teams in the league, but then the ARC had like 3 through 7, right? So it was like the NRC had, let's say the top 2 or 3 teams in the entire RFL, but then teams 4 through 15 were oftentimes dominated by the ARC, right? So historically, to give you an example, I'm talking about something like the Explorers and the Steamers and the Thunderbirds, right? Those are like the top 3 teams in the league. They're all in the NRC. But then you go to the ARC and you might have from team 4 to team 10, they might all be the ARC. It might be the Bulldogs, the Voyagers, the Miners, the Red Dragons, right? Like, that's not uncommon. And then go to the NRC and you slide in teams like the Diablos, the Desperados, maybe the Snowhawks, right? Like, that's sort of, I may have missed a team, but pretty much the teams that I just named have kind of historically within the last few years been the kind of like 15 teams that kind of, ebbed and flowed throughout the season. And I think now we're looking at a complete shift. And clearly Pecan recognizes it. But we've got the Diablos at 4-1 in the NRC. And that would be good enough for a wild card in the ARC. They wouldn't even be they would have to settle for a tie for first place if they were in the ARC. So just wildness throughout the entire RFL this year. And it's going to continue. It's going to continue, guys. So I appreciate you guys tuning in today. This went way longer than I thought. We got on a ton of tangents, but be sure to check out I believe the RFL podcast will be tonight. I don't think this one was delayed. I think last week's there was a delay, but so be sure to tune in tonight for that. And then Monday night we start week 6, and the Sacramento Miners will kick off week 6 without Buck Ulbrich. So again, we kick off week 6 without the services of Buck Ulbrich. We'll see how the squad looks. But as always, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Until next time, I am your host, head coach, and general manager, Chris Dunn of the Sacramento Miners. Until next time, take care, everybody. See ya.